We are now here at Finland Futures Research Center conference in Turku, and we are going to have roundtable interview and discussion with our keynote speakers, Mariana Bosesan, you are member of the Club of Rome, and Jerome Glenn, Executive Director of the Millennium Project. So welcome to this roundtable interview.
Thank you for having us.
It's nice to be here.
It's a great pleasure. We will host this with Markku Wilenius, and this will be used for the students in Finland Futures Academy and otherwise as well, Futures study students, and for our project T-Winning Spaces 2035, which is concerned with the futures of work and working environments and spaces. So we have a couple of questions that we would like to pose to you. And let's start with the relationship of work and leisure time, because it has been long a topic discussed from many dimensions, but traditionally they have been seen as separate spheres of life, and the well-being of people is involved here. But what do you think? Because nowadays also people are doing similar things in their work and then continuing in their leisure time. So actually, can work be leisure and vice versa, leisure being work? So, and what are the impacts? What do you think? Perhaps, Mariana, would you like to start? What are your feelings about this balance between work and leisure time?
My feeling is based on what I know personally, and I came to this recognition that there is no separation unless you want to be schizophrenic between what you do at work and what you do at home. So we are one whole an entity. And we can separate the things, and we do separate the tasks, but not job and home. So, and which is something that is being reflected by artificial intelligence right now, that is taking over tasks of what we do, sometimes better than we do. So unless we come back to the recognition that we are one person, and try to integrate that as good as possible in our lives, we will be separated, separating our soul, our mind, our consciousness, our family, and we'll have a hard time integrating that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what you already addressed in your keynote speech about this requirement that we should feel as a whole being and not separate our lives in silos. And so how about Jerome Glenn? Jerry, how do you feel?
The English word leisure, originally did not mean when you're not working. The original meaning was the time at which you would do something. You would do it at your leisure. A gentleman or a lady of leisure was one that set their own time system, right? Mm. So now, in a sense,
there was even mentioned this leisure class.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's right, because they are in charge of their time.
They are in charge of it.
So now, unfortunately, it's moved to that schizophrenia. Like leisure is when you're not working. Mm. All right. So I like the earlier definition, and I think we're going back to that. You're picking your own time more than you did it before. But the idea and the essence underneath your question is that yes, the freer we are through all kinds of technological means and economic means, the freer we are picking our time for what we do. And if we are freer to pick more of the time for what we do, then a rational decision would be to do those things that you actually enjoy. Mm. Like, for example, before this interview, unbeknownst to the people watching this, we were joking around. Were we at play? Were we at leisure? We were at work. Mm-hmm. It was all mixed together at that moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that becomes much more normal in the future. Yes.
So we are just sort of finishing this what you call the schizophrenic era in a way, and coming to what we really are, and this industrial time, which kind of pushes up to separate those two kind of dimensions of our ways of life. Yeah. So time is sort of coming close to the end.
Yeah, just a touch. Add on to that.
Yes.
nature in an agricultural age defines your time. When you reap, that's nature's in charge of that.
Right.
The industrial age, the linear, everybody had to go to the factory at the same time because you turn on the factory, right? So that factory was running us. But now the information economy and future ones, we increasingly have more choice of time.
Yes, exactly. And this kind of concept of time you mentioned, like nature time, it's cyclic.
Right.
Instead of being linear, but also how we value time.
Right.
We more and more value time that we can use on leisure, and it's related to the Millennium Project scenario on self-actualization economy. Maria, do you still want to say something?
Yes, I did. I wanted to bring artificial intelligence in this game because I think it helps us wake up to our true nature, because otherwise we will be competing with computers that can think much faster than we do. And so that's an opportunity for us to grow up, meaning to become who we really are in recognition of what helps us be well.
Yeah, and exactly this you bring up artificial intelligence, because there's so much threats and fears against artificial intelligence, but it can be a wake-up call. We should rethink what we are as human beings. But this brings to my mind a question about how to govern then artificial intelligence, and even more when it's moving towards artificial general intelligence. How do you think this, how could we govern the development of artificial intelligence and moving towards artificial general intelligence and in the sphere of work life? Maybe Jerry, you will start.
The real answer to that would go on our website, because this is extremely complex. I would say managing the transition from artificial narrow intelligence we have today to artificial general intelligence that we have in a few years is the most difficult, complex management challenge humanity has ever faced. So answering it glibly is difficult, so I'll try. The user, the developer, I think should have a set of rules. What are the rules for developing it before it goes on the internet? You have to prove safety. How do you prove safety? A variety of means. The nation state has got to set up a licensing procedure that they got to meet to get licensed. Just like you got to have a license to drive a car. We don't tell you where to drive the car, but we tell you got to stop at a stop sign, right? Then the international systems, UN, maybe a hybrid system between humans and AI, because the only way you can keep up with AI is AI itself. So you have a bunch of narrows taking care of managing the general. But then also the user at the other end has got some rules as well. And an example of that, they might have to agree that their system would have a flight recorder, like in an airplane, so that if something goes wrong, we can find out what it is. Now, there's a whole lot more behind all of those, but it gives you a flavor. So it's not just regulations and governance for one category. It's for the developer, it's for the country, it's for the international, and it's for the user.
Again, the complexity and the whole system has to be taken into account. Mariana, would you like to add something to this?
Well, I am in favor of defining terms before using them and to define them very thoroughly. So I would invite the students to really do their homework in depth, because it is extremely complex, and I couldn't agree more. And what we currently have today is, the LLMs, and everyone is scared about them, which is a very narrow approach of cognitive or knowledge information that we make available to people that scares them because they haven't thought about many things the way they could have. So I'm inviting everyone to really begin to dig deeper with the humanity that we have, which, and now I'm making a statement that we are non-computable. So I do not believe that we will be surpassed by artificial intelligences for many reasons. One being because they will never have a soul. They will never have consciousness the way we do. And this is the level of superiority that humans will always have. We talked before about, we have a wonderful assistant here whose name is Sky. And we talk about the Akash record, the collective humanity and consciousness that we all are. And so artificial general intelligence will well, depending how we define it, will never come in the way it's currently defined. And I would refer to the Moravec paradox, who says that, computers do things that are complicated and complex for us very easily, but they don't have the perception and mobility of a 1-year-old. And even if we get to the point where we will have robots that will be able to assist, we have them today at some point, to cook for us, which is amazing, which is what we want to make our life much easier. We don't have to be scared that they will surpass us, and in terms of what we want to do as a job or work in the future. As long as we're willing to connect with who we really are and dig deeper and go beyond knowledge.
Yeah.
What do you think then when there are lots of fears about our societies becoming kind of a surveillance-based societies and capitalism and market economy coming more like that, more controlling power, more kind of particularly those that want to just to keep the power themselves, kind of overlooking people in ever new ways, and I think this is not totally baseless, this kind of a possible scenario as well. So how do we deal with that? How do we proactively avoid that type of a situation or development that we have seen already traces? Think about the China, for instance, and you see a lot of those kinds of elements already there. So how do you think that we should be dealing with this?
Well, if I may respond. Glenn already said it. That's exactly what we need to do. And what I just said before doesn't mean that we need to prevent AI from doing the bad things that it can do without consciousness. So, and I grew up in communist Romania. I was 16 when I left that country because we were surveilled. The walls had microphones everywhere, so we were scared. I know exactly what it means, and as a computer scientist and AI major, I am even more scared as as how this technology can be used to serve the lowest of human qualities, if we want to call them control, command and control, and power. And we don't have to go far. We can look at the world as it is today to see how bad it is. Climate change. I don't need to enumerate them. So we have already created that. So now, as a humanity, we are asked to really join forces together. And what makes us different from those AIs and from underdeveloped people who act immorally to together counteract it. This is what we should be doing right now.
So do you see, Jeremy, that this is something which is already kind of happening, that we get these rules, disciplines,
I'm
procedures?
because when I list all of the ways to protect or counter it, and then I list all of the ways that can counter that, the bar graphs look different. I sort of gave up on privacy in the mid-'70s. I just, I'm not happy with what I'm saying. I mean, one may not like gravity, it's a drag, but there it is, there's so many ways. I'm not so much worried necessarily about Big Brother, singular, but more about a whole bunch of little cousins. So it's not only governments and corporations, but an individual. Let's say you don't like what your wife is doing or something like that. I mean, the surveillance stuff, there's so many ways to do it, and so many. Now, and also there's a lot of ways to block it and so forth. It would be nice if we win on that, but I'm resigned that I might not win at that. So now it has one advantage. And that is, the old story is if you go into a store and there's a camera on you, you're less likely to steal. If the store managers and the other thing are left of the store, the temptation is different. So one advantage could be a more honest society. And one corollary to this, I'm on the IEEE International Economic, Engineering Society and so forth. That's working on the governance for narrow AI, not general, but narrow AI. And most of what we're doing is we are specifically defining very detailedly all these values that people say they want. So that if an auditor comes in and says, I want to audit your software, what's the definition of well-being? What's the definition, all the, and so what that means, what hit me on this was we are designing into the AI the best qualities of humanity, whether you're on China, United States, wherever, the best qualities we can put into it. So if you say the average human does nice things and not nice things, but if the AI is doing a lot of decisions, infrastructure decisions and all the rest of it, it ought to be on average more moral, ethical decision making than humans. So that's the other side of the coin as well.
And this is also related, we are interested in the role of leadership in the future. Markku, you could...
Yeah, actually, because artificial intelligence is also there for us to support, I guess, the new structures that we sort of, we inherited something from industrial age, which is very hierarchical, top-down kind of stuff. And now we are moving into the space where totally different way of leadership systems and procedures are possible. But we don't really know exactly what that does mean. What does the heterocracy mean? But how do we actually go about that? We see that there are emerging all kinds of models around that. But it's a bit of a new world, very interesting. And now with the AI, it's even getting much more interesting because there is also this intelligence that is kind of generated by these digital systems. So how do you see this evolving into the future? What type of the leadership we will have with AI and with the fact that this information space itself is enabling us much more communication in terms of the quality as well, and enabling us to use the potential as human beings much more than we ever did before. Mariana.
The short answer is, because you asked us to be short, is Iron Man, the Iron Man trilogy. That's a very good manifestation or example for us. What could be in the interim situation in terms of results. People, leadership. This egocentric person who then transformed to help humanity by being supported, through Jarvis, right? A very benevolent AI, which is exactly what you were describing, which we all aim to do. As a scientist, I would encourage again the audience to go back and do the research, which, what does intelligence mean? I asked myself this question as a computer scientist in artificial intelligence, a major that I studied 40 years ago, back 25 years ago after our first IPO. I'm an entrepreneur as well. I looked at the schizophrenia of the world that we're currently experiencing. On one hand, making all these billions. Actually, we're talking about trillions these days. Only the person who has trillions is worth something. And so on one hand, all this Wall Street behavior as a generalization. And on the other, humanity, with philanthropy trying to set it off. And then all these movements in terms of impact investing and social enterprise and purpose companies and blah, 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 which are so silos amongst ourselves. So we need to find ways to integrate that. So I went back to school because I wanted to find out what drives good leaders, or what I saw are good leaders. And I was so amazed and positively surprised, and that's why I'm very optimistic as to how psychologists across the world at the best schools, Stanford, Harvard, and MIT, developed models that can help us become better leaders. And move from an egocentric mindset to an ethnocentric mindset, which is, us as nations, to us Europeans, us the world, to it integrating all of the planet, which is, by the way, may not allow us to continue to do our old thing.
No.
And so it's very complex, and it is hard work. So Hero's Journey is one amazing manifestation described in so many movies as well. Right. Joseph Campbell did work. So I would encourage you to really look at different exact definitions of intelligence, like from cognitive intelligence to emotional intelligence, morals, And they all evolved values. You mentioned self-actualization, which is the needs, the Maslow pyramid. But also there is egocentric, ego development. Suzanne Cook-Reuter, how the identity of a human evolves from, from lower level to higher levels. And this is not known by the developers of AI. And so all they're focusing on is knowledge. And they're going to mimic emotions and they're going to mimic morals and ethics.
Without really having that.
They don't have consciousness and they are not going to evolve in the same way we do. So do your studies, do your research. I brought a book, so here's can have it.
Interesting readings, and we have to have understanding of
Yes.
these different dimensions that are needed for value creation, knowledge creation. But knowledge is not enough, obviously. So we need intelligence and better consciousness, awareness of the entities. But how about Jerome Glenn? What do you think is the most urgent skill needed for a good leader?
Oh, well, let me jump back to the original question. That's a little easier.
Yeah.
One of the things I've learned in doing futures research for a long time and seeing what actually happens years later is that whatever you look at, leadership, anything, as a generalization, I would say it always turns out more complex than you think. So if you're forecasting, imagine how it could become like leadership. How could it become, a really complex array, and then double that complexity? And I figure you get closer to it. So, for example, yes, I think that there will be a lot of new startups that are computer run. The autonomous software stuff. There's even an AI being developed in Australia that is going to position itself as a startup CEO. Then you put some people around it, and then you have a corporation. I think another part of leadership is collective intelligence, increasingly, because everything is too complex and increasingly complex. So it's hard for a leader to know enough all the time. So if you have a collective intelligence system that's learning all the time, and that you have even the janitor and the CEO and the board member and the personnel department, they all have a way to interact with that collective intelligence. So the whole corporation develops its own brain, and that becomes indirectly a decision-making system to some degree. And then, of course, you'll still have the charismatic hotshots. So my short answer to your question on leadership is imagine a whole range from an autonomous, totally computer to the Herman Kahn approach to running a think tank.
Which is the old ways. Right. Mariana, you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to go back to knowing thyself, which is what it says in the Oracle of Delphi. Know thyself, and that's the hardest thing to do. But we won't be able to be good leaders in an organization with a supportive AI. We're still having people who are doing what the AI won't be able to do. Unless you understand people and you know where everybody is at and where you can pick everybody up where they are, not where you are, and are able to integrate. And I think as soon as people understand that we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions, we are not we are born and will die, after 80 years, we're part of a bigger system. Then as soon as we understand that and get access to who we really are behind the thoughts, we are the thinker behind the thoughts, we won't be able to access true capabilities of a leader. And in my research, this is exactly the hero's journey that all the great leaders who are currently transforming the world, maybe we don't see that, but all of us who are sitting here, we've undergone this development.
I think you're talking about something interesting and important, and I want to bring this discussion a little bit forward. You're talking about the being level, what I call the being level.
Yeah, the top of the Maslow pyramid.
Yeah, exactly.
Being
where
needs.
it's a freedom and responsibility at the same,
And
kind of a core. But then you mentioned, Mariana, earlier, and of course it needs to be also a topic of our discussion here, that there is something which is really challenging apart from the how to use the AI, which is all this depressing thing about the climate change and the destruction of nature. And now that we are kind of a fast forward moving to this digital space and using that increasingly, it doesn't seem to be self-evident that this is something that will kind of cure the problem by itself. So it seems like we are needing something else. I heard you, Jeremy, saying in some of the podcasts that, well, you learned when you were a young man out of your own family background that there's more than knowledge, there's consciousness.
Yeah.
And while we are kind of a bit being addicted to the knowledge, we should actually turn ourselves more towards the consciousness aspect of becoming aware. And I think this awareness process has been going on now for some time, but apparently not fast and not deep enough. So how do you see that this moving into fast forward to this digital space would enable us actually to really to tackle the challenge that we have ahead of us in terms of the climate change?
Since you brought up being, sort of a nice concept, I do like a little chart, past and future thing. And under wealth, I put down or how you get wealth, or what people see as wealth or power. The agricultural age was land. You had more land than I do, you're more powerful, more wealthy. That doesn't work in so necessarily industrial age, because Japan did well, but per capita didn't have a whole lot of land. But then it was machine and sort. Then you go to the age today. It's more defined by access. If you have more access than the other corporation, you do better. And then I think the next conscious technology age, where the consciousness and technology becomes a continuum, then I think the wealth is being, who you are. And if you're boring, you're poor, so to speak.
Yeah, and leadership is about being, but also becoming, and consciousness and communication. As a last topic for our roundtable discussion, I would like to raise the role of narratives in future studies and also for leadership, because leaders need to have the skill for communication. But in general, there is a huge gap between research, studies, and policymakers and decision making. So we have to build a bridge to across these stakeholders, and of course we make scenarios and we have a lot of methods in future studies, but increasingly there is need for narratives, very vivid illustrative narratives, in order to convey the messages and evidence that we get from study to policymakers. So how do you see the role of narratives, and what are good narratives, and how could we use better narratives in these kind of situations?
I'm so bad at that. I'm so sorry. I can only use examples from my, deep work with entrepreneurs and technology in trying to address the grand global challenges, because they are here. And unless we join forces and get rid of the silos, mine is better than yours, we won't be able to address them. That's an answer to your previous question. So that's my conviction. And the planet gives us only 10 to 15 years time to really respond. But all that we need, from my perspective, we can do right now. Technology exists. We need to join forces and with the right narrative. So what narrative can I bring to somebody who is actually trying to regulate AI? My son grew up with 2 artificial intelligence majors, my husband and I, and poor guy, what can he do to survive and, become somebody?
Become a poet.
Which is exactly what he did.
I guess I am a good forecaster.
You are a forecaster after all.
So he, of course, he studied economics and artificial intelligence at the TU München, but he said, but I am a screenwriter. I want to make movies. So I think movie making is such an amazing way of quickly created a narrative that people can emotionally and cognitively connect to the message. And I think this is where AI comes in and can help us amazingly quickly, because he stands on stage. He's now, of course, speaking, and he uses AI. He was hired off the cuff by one of the top movie producers in Germany. And he stands on stage and shares all the data, all the applications that he uses to make movies quickly, without wasting resources, right? Because it's all AI is supporting.
Yeah.
And so people come and ask him, well, why do you share all these secrets of yours? And he goes, well, first of all, because I want to help you use your skills with this so you know. Secondly, because I know I am going to be ahead of you because you guys are not going to use them. Just like Tesla published all of their IP for people to make EVs and nobody was using them to get ahead, to create, change the transportation paradigm. So this is maybe a good narrative.
That's a very nice, and goes back to what Jerry, you said earlier about, it's about the honesty. I would say also additionally transparency. Yeah. And if you are really making that as a force behind, then you're not afraid anymore to
You're free.
You're free. You're free.
Yeah. In all senses.
It's really fantastic. Yeah. Nice.
I think our current narrative is you go to school, do okay, you get a job and do okay. Then we, whether you're from China or the United States or Finland, then we'll give you some retirement stuff. And that's the narrative. That's the general narrative, which may not work so well because we're aging longer, so financially it may not last. And secondly, with the AI figuring what you fit into, it may not be there later on to fit into. So I think we've got to come up with a new narrative. I think that's critical. And in the Future of Work and Technology 2050 we did, scenario 3, which was the good one, in there, the role of narrative and art was the key variable to make it work. Because right now, people have an identity by their academic background and what job they have. I am an economist, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. But if you are most people are like, that's it? I'm naked to the world? I mean, I'm insecure. I gotta fit in somewhere. That's what the whole civilization says, you gotta fit in. So that's hard for people. And so that idea of narrative, so that people can see how one gets to know thyself, growing up, like the Finnish education, by the way, congratulations on that transition in Finland. Because you're getting ready for your people better than most, anyway, long story. Anyway, so the idea of showing narratives in many different ways, how you can make a living eventually being yourself, how you can connect to markets worldwide. Right now we think of the marketplace as a center, we revolve all around it. Well, that's not true, because we've got the internet, meaning that every individual that's connected, 2/3 or so, that means that 2/3 of the world is revolving around every individual, but we don't know how to deal. We're not taught how to deal with it. We're taught how to fit in. So the narrative is very important, so that people are secure enough to grow up trying to figure out who they are and how they connect to the world and do. And that is going to be a gigantic transition for yourself. And that's narrative all the way. I don't know how else to do it.
Exactly, and a very meaningful narrative and to have an impact. So I think we are now concluding this roundtable interview. We appreciate very much of you being here, Mariana Posisan and Jerome Glenn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.